You're welcome back to Hello Nigeria, and yes, we have our special guest in the studio. This week, as Ayo said before we went on the break, Max Celebration, the whole world and indeed Nigeria that birthed this legend is celebrating the life of Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and we have a special guest in the studio, publisher and writer, Mr. ADEDAYO Akintobi, to tell us more about Fela, and he's the publisher of Fela Today. Nice to have you on Hello Nigeria.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Really great to have you, sir. And it's such an honor. A lot of people, particularly Nigerians, and I think the rest of the world, try to grasp as much as Fela as they can because he's such a legend. Yet, unfortunately, didn't live long enough or write enough books or enough documentaries to get into the life of this great man. Why do you think? I know for obvious reasons, but in your own, as someone who studied his life very closely, why do you think he is regarded as a legend?
Well, Fela he lived well before his time, and he had a very profound message that he spread consistently throughout his lifetime across many media, and he never wavered in his message, which was essentially fighting against social injustice. He believed that the ills that plague us in society, things like injustice, oppression, inequality, discrimination, racism, tribalism, economic inequality, all the things that plague a naturally developing country, all embodied under this one catch-all called corruption. And he stood for that so consistently that over time his message started to resonate in such a way that people identified with it and continue to do so 20 years after his demise.
Speaking about people identifying with his message, there are many people who have adored Fela. I mean, Aya Thompson here wanted to be a Fela dancer while she was growing up. And here in Nigeria, we've seen people still speak very highly of him. But when it comes to our academics, we talk so much about people like Desmond Tutu, people like the South African fighter, what's his name again? Nelson Mandela. Do you think that we are recognizing Fela as we should? Are we doing enough when it comes to our schools, our history lessons? Are we just focusing on celebrating other people's heroes and neglecting ours? Are we celebrating Fela enough?
Well, first of all, history was taken out of the curriculum in Nigerian schools a number of years ago. And as a result, that has created a vacuum in terms of being able to not only appreciate, but also understand the depth of conviction of our freedom fighters. I think Fela is starting to come into his own after his passing away. He's always said we're not celebrated during our lifetime. Yeah. It's after we pass on that people begin to appreciate what we stood for. And that's coming true in Fela's case. While he was here and while he was in our midst, people appreciated more of his music, but didn't look deeper into what he was having to say. As a result, I think that he was a little bit misunderstood. I think he was a little bit underappreciated. And that's what we've tried to do with the magazine we've written in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of his passing, is to present to you the Fela you never really knew and didn't have an opportunity to appreciate.
So what's the content of this magazine, and who are these people that are talking about the Fela that we didn't know? Is it your writing? Is it family members? And what's the content?
Well, I wish I could write half as good as most of the content that's in there. But what we did was we gathered a bunch of people who were close to Fela back in the day, literary and musical giants who worked with him, lived with him, performed with him, got beaten, battered, bruised, and locked up with him. Some were married to him. Some collaborated with him. And we called all of them together and said, we'd like to present the Fela that Nigeria didn't really know. He had a public persona, which many of us are familiar with, but there was a lot more to Fela than what we saw in the public market square. And as a result, we have 30 contributors who are very close to him. There were some who didn't even know him. There are some 20-something-year-olds who wrote about him who just happened to have been influenced by his legacy, by his music, and by his history. But by and large, a good number of those who wrote in this magazine are those who are talking in the first person directly about one-on-one intimate interactions.
So there are things here that even biographers have missed out on.
Absolutely. There are gems in there that even his biographers have not captured in the past. But what makes this significant is that you have 30 different contributors under one umbrella. It's the first time it's ever been done. Many things have been written about Fela in books, in magazines, across the spectrum. But it's the first time you have a group of insiders coming together under one medium and putting together this rich history, insider personal details about Fela. There are things in there you'll read that will surprise you.
I'm already interested
Fantastic.
by the content.
I was going to say this. Music is big in Nigeria. I mean, this new generation, Fela will be proud. Maybe not of the content of their music, but the fact that it's global and Afrobeat as it is, Afro-pop is catching up. Fela invented the genre Afrobeat and people are mixing it up right now. I want to say that a lot of the social injustices that Fela sang about still exist in present day. But people are not brave enough to sing about it. I'm not saying they should use the same bravado and rhetoric he used, but you have a lot of successful musicians and say, oh, Fela influenced them. But all they're singing about is champagne that 80% of the population, 90% cannot afford those luxurious lifestyles, and singing about things that really don't matter when there's a lot of suffering still going on. Why is this the case?
There's a difference between music for entertainment and music as a medium for passing a message. Fela used his music for activism and advocacy. He used it to fight social ills. More of the musicians today are using music to entertain, to make us forget our sorrows, to give us this notion of a champagne lifestyle and caviar dreams. And yes, today's music is entertaining, but the difference is in Fela's day, we were not only entertained by his music, but we were taught by it, we were enlightened by it, we were motivated by it, and he galvanized us to action.
Is that what makes him celebrated all over the world?
I think so. When Fela died, he had only one house. He was not about amassing wealth at all. What he was about was for the emancipation of the black race.
All right, now having studied his life so closely, if Fela were to live today, if he were still alive today, what kind of songs do you think he would be doing? What would he think of the Nigeria of today that he had been fighting? Because some of the songs he sang many years ago are still very relevant today. Animal in human skin, speaking about the United Nations giving human rights to people, speaking about teacher, don't teach me nonsense, talking about water, I know get enemy, we don't have water.
Don't have it.
There's so many things. And I have to give a shout out to my dad, who is responsible for my knowledge of Fela music, because we grew up, listening to Fela, to his music. What kind of songs do you think you'll be doing today? And do you think you'll be happy with what is on ground today?
Well, Fela actually did die disillusioned because he felt like he had been banging his head against a brick wall and it was not getting any responses. And ultimately, towards the latter part of his life, he began to mellow a little bit because he wasn't getting the kind of feedback, the kind of action. His call to action was not being heeded as such. Now, we have a feature in the magazine that says 10 Fela songs that are relevant today, and it looks at each of those songs in the context of which he sang 30, 40 years ago and how they relate today. For example, you talk about Animal in Human Skin.
That's right.
I think that came from Beasts of No Nation.
Yes.
And we were at the shrine as part of Celebration a couple of nights ago, and there was a documentary that was being played, and Beasts of No Nation was in the background. And he started out with the military administration in power and started showing a metamorphosis of a general in uniform, metamorphosing into a politician in a suit campaigning for office, and then changing to Agbada as a politician in office.
We've seen that play out.
It kept saying, Animal in Human Skin.
Many leaders, as you see them, not different disguise them, they oh. Animal in human skin, animal in put to tire, animal in wear agbada, animal in
and they were showing the general changing according to the words he was singing. Meanwhile, he sang that 30 years ago, and the general just recently, in the last few years, has metamorphosed exactly according to the pattern Fela spoke about 30 years ago. That's incredible.
I think
that's why
it's basically now we can see that Fela is indeed a prophet. He prophesied. He was the man who saw tomorrow.
Exactly.
Now, this magazine that you've put together, I can see it and I'm very, very interested. I can't wait to start reading it. How can people get access to this magazine?
Very good. It's available at all Celebration venues for the rest of this week, which is New Africa Shrine, Freedom Park, Necker House. It's available at Federal Palace Hotel where they're having the concert tonight. It's also available through our Facebook page, which is Fela Today on Facebook. It's also available through Instagram, which is Fela Today Mag. There are ordering instructions on those sites. We're also trying to supply to various bookstores and other places where literary people are interested.
Yes, I think you should. It's really something.
It's very
rich. I'm really excited.
It's part of our history, honestly. We cannot talk about the history of Nigeria and not mention Fela Nicola Kuti, particularly in the arts, entertainment, and even in politics, even though he did his through music.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Mr. Akintobi, for coming this
It's
afternoon.
been an absolute
The pleasure
pleasure.
is mine. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, guys, I know I can almost bet what you're doing right now. You're humming the song to Beast of No Nation and singing some other Fela songs, because this will certainly bring to mind and memory some of the greatest songs that this legend produced from Nigeria to the world. Unfortunately, we had to close our curtains on that, but don't stop singing, don't stop remembering his legacy. When we come back, we'll be looking at sports with Nnamdi Ekugba.
To enjoy more of these our Ogbonge videos when you just watch, press this button to subscribe on top of our YouTube page. You go love am.